We're investing in the skills and training for people in the UK.
A 21-year-old man has been arrested in connection with fires at two homes in North London linked to the Prime Minister. The Metropolitan Police say a suspect was detained in the early hours of this morning. A court in France has found the film star Gérard Depardieu guilty of sexual assault against two women. The 76-year-old French actor was accused of groping the women on a film set in 2021. He denied both allegations. LBC's reporter in Paris, Peter Allen, is following developments.
Gérard Depardieu is not in court this morning. He's in Portugal, but the judge at the Paris Correctional Court has just handed down an 18-month suspended prison sentence to the film star. This is the most high-profile French Me Too case to date.
Marks & Spencer has revealed that some personal customer data was stolen in last month's cyber attack. In an email to customers, the retailer said that the breach could include contact information, but went on to say that passwords, payment and account details were not accessed. The Japanese car maker Nissan says it plans to cut 20,000 jobs globally as it looks to reduce costs. The figure is more than double than was previously announced. Nissan employs around 6,000 people at its UK factory in Sunderland, but it's unclear what impact, if any, the cuts will have there. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the French President Emmanuel Macron will travel to the UK for a state visit this summer. The King and Queen will host the President and his wife at Windsor Castle for 2 days in early July. And Novak Djokovic has ended his partnership with Sir Andy Murray. Sir Andy had been working with the 24-time Grand Slam tennis champion in a coaching capacity. In the city, a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up a point at 86.06. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.18. LBC weather dry and sunny again for many today. Some scattered thundery showers lingering for southern England and Wales. Highs of 25 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dominic Ellis.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Speak to Sadiq. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, takes your calls.
7 minutes after 11 is the time. The Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, is here. If you want to put a question to him, the number you need is, as always, 0345 6060973. And sliding the Mayor into the middle of the show actually increases your opportunity of getting on air, because we're quite creatures of habit as radio people. You can watch it live on the brand new LBC app. And if you want to put a question to the Mayor, you can call us now on 0345 6060973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. And speaking of the brand new LBC app, I was reading a rather splendid article on there not long ago in which Sadiq Khan, somebody wrote, increasingly we came to appreciate that our people could have multiple identities. For example, I'm proud to be a Londoner and to be English, just as I'm proud to be of Pakistani and Asian heritage and proud to be European and someone of Islamic faith. In my eyes, these identities don't contradict one another. They make us who we are. There's no tension between patriotism and pluralism. Apparently, they make us an island of strangers.
Well, let me be quite clear. Good morning, James, to you and your listeners. I speak both as the Mayor of London and as a citizen of this great city my entire life, and saying I recognise every day the massive contribution a successive wave of migrants has made to our city economically, socially and culturally. And I want to thank those who are migrants for what they do for our great city. I'm the son of immigrants, as you alluded to, and I can say from my own personal experience that I practice my faith. I'm very proud of my heritage, which is Pakistani and Indian, but also of being a Londoner and a Brit.
A squalid chapter of rising inward migration, your leader? Because you mentioned you're Mayor of London, you mentioned your nationality, you mentioned your religion, your background, your family. You didn't mention your membership of the Labour Party.
Well, look, the sort of language that I use is different to the sort of language used by others. That's not the sort of words that I would use. And I just say this to your listeners. I think it's possible to recognise the massive contribution made by lawful migration, but also to recognise that many of the promises made by the Brexiteers were false. We've gone from a situation where lawful migration was 100,000, 200,000, to where it's 900,000, 700,000, more than 600,000. And I think we should have control over our borders. But I think you can be consistent in saying that and also recognising the massive contribution made by successive generations of migrants.
What emotions do you feel when you see those words, like squalid chapter and island of strangers, from a Labour Prime Minister?
Well, my job is to reassure those of you listeners who may be nervous and titchy. Well, when you read the entire white paper, the white paper actually is about solutions to some of the challenges faced.
It's not just about the message, is it? It's about the messenger, and the messenger chose to use those phrases, and he's your mate, Keir Starmer.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you listen to the Prime Minister's speech, he also talked about diversity being a strength.
But I'm not asking you, respectfully, I'm not asking you about those bits. I'm asking you how you feel about these bits, specifically. Squalid chapter. He's talking about your parents. And an island of strangers. He's talking about you.
I think, to be fair to the Prime Minister, it's important that we are. He was referring to recent years in terms of the promises.
Talking about someone else's parents.
Well, no, the point he was making, I think, from the passage in the speech you're referring to, is the promises made by Brexiteers to, inverted commas, take back control. The highest numbers of net migration have been in the most recent years. 900,000, 700,000, 600,000. I think, and you'll correct me, that's what he's referring to. What he was not referring to, because I know how rich his constituency is in relation to the contribution made by migrants, is the contribution we make to this multicultural capital city and country.
And yet you know that the numbers announced next week are going to be half of the figures, that even the lowest figure that you've just cited. I'll ask you one more time how you felt personally, and you've been very honest with me in this studio over the years, including on questions like this when the words perhaps had come from other lips. How do you feel to hear a Labour Prime Minister talking about a squalid, that word squalid chapter, not an unacceptable chapter or an unreasonable or an unsustainable chapter, a squalid chapter and an island of strangers?
Well, those aren't words that I'd use.
But how did you feel?
Well, look, I read the white paper,
okay,
and I understand the context of the white paper, and those aren't words that I'd use. Before we head to the phones, what on earth happened on the London Underground yesterday? So if I could explain,
there's a gear change for you.
Yeah, no. Rightly speaking, the National Grid and UK Power Network have apologised. There was an issue with an outage, which meant voltage was lost. For reasons your listeners will appreciate, the Underground, our trains rely upon a huge amount of electricity. The voltage going down meant we couldn't provide a safe service, and I apologise to commuters who were inconvenienced, including me and people who work across London. TfL worked incredibly hard and got the tubes and trains running very quickly afterwards, and today I've used the service this morning. There's full service running today. It does actually remind us of the importance of resilience in our infrastructure, and decades of underinvestment have led to these sorts of problems. Thankfully speaking, we didn't have the same challenges as Heathrow with flights, trains not going for a day, or Spain and Portugal. But I think it is worth us thinking about why we've got to invest in things we won't really see, like infrastructure, but when things go wrong, we experience bad things.
Explain the role of the Capital Fund to us in the context of things like this. Is it relevant?
It is in terms of supporting National Grid, UK Power Network in investing in these sorts of things. But we've got to think about the resilience of the infrastructure we have, and also investing in new infrastructure. And the comparison I give is, just imagine, during the Victorian times, nobody actually probably wanted sewers to be built. But thank God they built those sewers, because they lead to, us being able to live in this city in the way we can. And the same goes with stuff like infrastructure to do with gas, electricity, renewables and so forth.
Should we take a call?
Sure. The first caller is from Croydon, and I think it's Anna.
Anas.
I beg your pardon.
It's Anas.
Apologies, Anas. Good morning. You okay?
Morning. Yeah, first-time caller. My question was, what are your plans for housing for first-time buyers?
And
It's a gear change, but
no, it's a very important gauge. But I think that the housing crisis, and I call it a crisis, is the biggest challenge facing our city. Frankly speaking, the supply of homes haven't met the demand, which is why the price has gone up for both renting and buying a home. So we, over the last few years, have been building on average 40 to 45,000 new homes a year. That's more homes completed than any time since the 1930s. But when I tell you over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to need, roughly speaking, 90,000 new homes a year, you'll appreciate the challenges that your generation faces in terms of a first-time buyer. So we're doing a number of things in terms of building on brownfield site, in other words, land already developed, making sure we work with councils to build council homes. What I announced last week, Anas, was for the first time ever, I'll be actively exploring the release of some parts of the Greenbelt. This is low-quality, badly maintained, poorly accessible land on the outskirts of our city, which is 3 times the size of London, with conditions. So what I'll be saying to developers and councils is this land will be released only if you maximise affordable housing, important to your generation and other Londonites. They're well built, good quality designs, good transport connectivity, improved biodiversity, energy efficient, and so forth. So we're going to carry on trying to break records with most homes being built and completed, but at the same time, Anas, for the first time in decades, actively explore the release of Greenbelt land.
How does it work when because we've got loads of building near me in Brentford, and some of it being delayed, and recent announcements that some groundbreaking moments have been postponed, and it often is about how much of it is affordable. Do the developers play kind of hardball on this? So when you tell them that they need to have, and I know affordable is a movable feast, but it's the only word we have. They tell you tell them they need to provide X affordable, and they come back to you after signing the deal and say, well, actually, we can't afford that.
Yeah, look, most developers are very sensible and very, and they're not unreasonable to make a profit. So the conversation we have, I'm just generalising, is, look, you want to make a profit, let's say for argument's sake 15%. Well, if you want to get permission, you've got to build X% of affordable homes, which means your profit goes down to 13% or 12%. It'll still be viable for you, but the quid pro quo of getting permission is we need X% of affordable. The councils work with us in relation to some of this. Some of the market value properties cross-subsidise affordable housing. But what you're alluding to, though, is really important. It's a perfect storm of challenges facing the sector. High interest rates, construction inflation, skills shortages, but also because of Grenfell, we're now requiring developers to build second staircases on tall buildings. They've got to make sure these homes are energy efficient. So there are challenges which this sector is facing, which is why we're lobbying the government for a big investment in the spending review coming up towards this sector, because they need support.
You mentioned skills shortages, and I know that the bricklayers, roofers, stonemasons, plumbers, carpenters still qualify for skilled workers visas after that white paper that you've read so assiduously. But the message that's been sent to some of those people is not exactly a welcome, Matt, is it? 3 sectors that I worry about is the construction sector, the care sector, and the health care sector. Why do I worry about them? Because we have record numbers of vacancies in these sectors. So there's 2 things we've got to do, in my view. One is, rapidly provide the skills training for, people to have the skills for the jobs being created. And the construction sector over the next few years, I think, is going to be booming. But secondly, recognise that with the best will in the world, we aren't going to get a queue of people wanting to be care workers or be working in the health sector. Why? A number of reasons. Pay's not great. The conditions aren't great. They've had years of under-investment. I've seen with my own eyes the difference a good care worker makes to somebody I love. She's not on a decent salary. She's going from looking after somebody I love to somebody else. And I think what the government, I'm hoping, will understand is actually some of these, lawful migrants who come here and do these jobs looking after our loved ones may not be done if there's a sudden exodus of some of these excellent care workers. Well, the message yesterday was pretty clear that they will be issuing fewer, or they want to issue fewer visas in that space particularly, not so much on construction or health necessarily, but on social care. The Unison trade union said it was only the recruitment of workers from overseas that stopped the system from falling over. And we know that Jess McGregor from the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services has said that thousands of older and disabled people, as you know personally, rely on international workers for their care and support.
But that's why I welcome the fact that it was a white paper. What the government didn't do yesterday, which they could have done, is publish a bill which turns into an act of parliament. What they've done instead, which I support, is publish a white paper. The white paper allows us to respond to a consultation, and I'll be making sure that I represent the views of Londoners in these sectors in terms of responding to this white paper.
Have you spoken to Keir Starmer since the speech?
Since yesterday, no.
Should take another call.
And then the second caller is from Enfield, and I hope I get this name right. It's Chris, I'm hoping.
It's a bit easier.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
Hi there. So, Makan, as a Thames Water customer yourself, what's your view on the 31% rise in water bills, especially given their ongoing failures in service, environmental responsibility and lack of infrastructure investment? And I suppose, at what point do you think it's reasonable for consumers to say enough is enough and refuse to pay?
Well, it's funny you say that because yesterday my direct debit went out for Thames Water and it's huge. And, Thames Water for a number of years have been providing a poor quality service and charging Londoners like you and I obscene amounts of money to pay for a poor quality service. At the same time, James asked me the question about investing in infrastructure. They've not been investing in infrastructure in terms of reservoirs and so forth. So although I've got no statutory powers over Thames Water, I have met the chief executive, the current one and the previous one. I've also met with Ofwat, who regulate the water industry. And, frankly, what the government has said as well to both Ofwat and Thames Water is that it's the last chance saloon. I'm not in favour, Chris, of the taxpayer subsidising shareholders and the owners by paying them lots of money to nationalise Thames Water. That may be an option further down the road. What's important, though, Chris, is that Thames Water understand they can't carry on expecting, users like you and I to bail out Thames Water. At the same time, in previous years, they've been paying record dividends to shareholders.
I mean, it's insane when you think about it. Chris is a little more measured, perhaps, than other people. It's absolutely bonkers when you describe it in the way that you have. And yet, as Chris has alluded to, we're all completely impotent. There's nothing we can do about it except refuse to pay, and then we get prosecuted.
Well, there's this step before that, which is to analyse how we got here, Chris. And, I don't want to get too ideological, but if you privatise a monopoly, don't be surprised if when that private company takes over the monopoly, they take you for a ride. Thames Water have been taking us for a ride for a long, long time. And that's why I'm saying I think the last chancellor is a really important message. What we don't want is those that own Thames Water and the shareholders to refuse to invest in Thames Water, the important work around leaks, the important work in relation to sewage discharge, the important work in relation to reservoirs. So, the thin line being walked is give them the confidence to invest in Thames Water, but say to them, listen, unless you sort it out, don't be surprised if we come back and nationalise you.
Did you see that report in London Centric, Jim Waterson's new project, about the pipes that are pumping sewage into rivers because they've been installed incorrectly?
No, but
I'll get that in front of you. It's really interesting.
What I do know is actually in a number of homes across our city, the way plumbing's been done is, rainwater discharge, the pipes for that often have toilet discharge going to those. So what's happening is some of our toilet waste, think of your home, should be going to a different sewer, but they're going into where rainwater should be going. So we're doing a lot of works in relation to repairing that issue, which is really important in terms of sewage discharge. At the same time, things we can do in relation to runoff from our roads and so forth. I mentioned the Victorian sewers, Joseph Bazalgette.
Yeah.
We've just recently, Thames Water have opened a new tideway tunnel, which will hopefully take away a lot of the discharge from our homes.
It's 22 minutes after 11. You're listening to the Mayor of London on LBC with me, James O'Brien. If you want to put a question to the Mayor, 0345 606 0973. That's a very, very busy switchboard this morning, but we'll try and free up a space for you by going to the next call.
Good morning. The next caller is from Battersea, near I know very well. Johnny, it's over to you.
Hi, Sadiq. We speak a lot about the supply side when it comes to the housing market, but I want to focus on the demand side.
Sure.
Lots of countries and cities around the world, they ban foreign investors from investing in residential property. Should we do the same in London?
So there's two answers to that. One is I'm in favour of when homes become available, Londoners having first dibs. So for the first 3 months, I think homes should only be marketed to Londoners. Homes for Londoners, and I've got nothing against foreigners, so my best friends and family are foreigners, but I think we've got to recognise your point about demand, and Londoners are in desperate needs of new homes. So for X period, only Londoners can buy those homes. But that goes to my second point, which is, unfortunately, and James alluded to a scheme near him, the way the development sector works is often they provide homes in phases. And the way to get cash in is to sell properties off plan, often to overseas investors. So what happened, Johnny, is I'm a developer. I'm building 1,000 units of homes. I'll build 100 at a time first. And then they've not been completed, so you can't get a mortgage on those. But I'll sell them off plan to somebody in Hong Kong or Singapore or the Middle East. They'll buy those with cash without a mortgage. I can use that money to build my second 100 homes or my third 100 homes. Now, one of the things we've got to be doing to help the development sector is either allow mortgage companies here to give mortgages in advance of a home being completed, or find another way. This is the government supporting developers to finance these schemes. This could be borrowing or elsewhere.
Well, how do other cities manage? How do other countries manage where they have some of the rules that Johnny describes?
Other cities across the globe are having similar problems. The urbanisation is meaning more and more people are moving to cities. So we're going to go from 45% now to about 55, 60% over the next 15 years. So if you speak to friends in New York, in Paris, in Milan, in LA, in Chicago, in San Francisco, they've got a massive housing crisis as well. That's urbanisation. That's why nothing wrong per se with growth. You've got to plan for the growth.
There's towns in Norfolk that have doubled the council tax of people who, if it's not their permanent residence. You could do that, couldn't you?
We can't do that. Sorry, councils can do that. Maximum double, that's not enough. I want councils to have the power to charge much more for leaving your property vacant. If you walk around parts of London, Johnny,
it's not just leaving it vacant, it's not being there all the time.
But actually, Johnny's in Battersea. Johnny, you go to Nine Elms, a lot of those properties there were built at like gold bricks investment. They've not been lived in because those who have bought it know equity will go up and the price of the flat will go up and they don't need to live there. Ones with great council, maximum they can charge is double council tax. Not being funny. If you can afford a flat and leave it empty, you can pay double council tax. I think boroughs should be allowed to charge much, much more. And we're lobbying the government to give councils more powers to disincentivise leaving a property empty.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, you describe a perfect circle, don't you? A vicious circle. Because the only people that have got enough money to be able to afford it are the people who are doing the things that you describe, which explain why so many people can't get on the ladder. A, because they can't afford it, and B, because the inflation is caused by the people who can afford it.
But we can solve this problem, and that's what good government
by making it an unattractive investment for people who aren't going to live there or even rent it out.
Shouldn't be. Look, these are homes. Bricks and mortar should be homes for people to live in and have great memories rather than gold bricks to invest in.
26 minutes after 11 is the time. On the subject of building, you've got your eyes on the Green Belt. It was announced last week, actively exploring building on some of London's Green Belt. That's a U-turn, isn't it?
It is. And let me explain why I've changed my view in relation to the Green Belt. We now have a government that's supporting London in terms of the homes we need, but also look at the numbers. Look, over the next 10 years, independent analysis says we need around 88,000 homes a year, roughly speaking, new homes a year. We've completed more homes than the 1930s, but it's about 45,000 per year. So there's a delta, a gap between the homes we're building, completing more time than any, the record number since the 1930s, and the homes we need. Even if we build on every piece of brownfield site in London, pre-developed land, we don't get anywhere near 88,000. So I'm not saying I'm going to build in your gorgeous park wherever you live in Chiswick or Battersea or wherever. We're not going to build on great green land in London. A lot of the Green Belt is poorly maintained, bad quality and inaccessible to Londoners. Only 13% of the Green Belt is parks and spaces accessible to Londoners. So we will be actively exploring those parts of the Green Belt, and we'll have conditions though. It won't be, a free-for-all. Conditions in relation to building that Green Belt.
It's a misunderstood phrase, isn't it? It's a misunderstood term, Green Belt. It doesn't mean that by definition sort of leafy idylls and glades and valleys.
See, I assumed
I did as
years ago, green and pleasant,
all of that.
Rich in wildlife. And then we analysed the Green Belt. Actually, look at the history of the Green Belt. The Green Belt was designated Green Belt to avoid urban sprawl, to avoid towns merging, and so forth. And I think we've got to recognise that actually a lot of the Green Belt is poor quality. Some is great and lush, and we're going to make sure that stays the case. A lot of it isn't.
28 after 11. Let's take another call.
The next call is from Orpington. Sunny, over to you.
Hello, how are you, Mayor?
I'm good. Sunny by name and sunny by nature, hey?
Yes.
As is the weather outside LBC.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my question to you is regarding yesterday's statement by Prime Minister. If you are the Prime Minister, will you make such comment that the way Britain is going to become an island for foreigner. And again, with such remark, make it difficult for people like you to become a leader in Labour.
Well, Sonny, I won't deal with the mischief making in your question. I'll deal with the substance of your point, if that's okay, which is, look, it's really important that I share my experiences as not just the child of immigrants, but as somebody born and raised in this city, and I've seen the contribution migrants have made. But let's look at the stats and the evidence. Whether you look at the OECD, PwC, the government's own Migration Advisory Committee, so a skilled migrant will contribute on average £16,000 a year towards our economy, and that's when you include the public services he or she may use. By the way, compare that to a Brit skilled worker, that's £800 minus the public services they use. And here's the lovely stat, Sonny, which you'll enjoy. A skilled migrant's family will contribute to the British economy £12,000 a year. That's even when you take away public services they use. A British skilled worker's family takes from the economy £4,400 when you include public services they use. So the idea that skilled migrants are sponges or skivers isn't the case. But when you go to M&S or the Body Shop or have a Cobra, all these things were set up by migrants. And I meet businesses all the time, Sonny, as you do. More than a third of the fastest growing businesses in the UK are either founded or co-founded by migrants. So I speak from personal experience, Sonny, not just as the son of migrants, not just as somebody born and raised in the city, but as the mayor of this great city, to see the contribution made by successive waves of migrants. That being said, Sonny, I also recognise we need to control our borders. I also recognise that the promises made by Brexiteers wasn't worth the air they took making these promises, and we've got to call them out in terms of net migration figures over the last few years. And that's why it's really important to, be pro the contribution made by immigrants, but also recognise we need controls over our borders.
So you wouldn't have made the speech yesterday or used the language that Keir Starmer used. I think that is clear. And indeed, you've said it yourself. The question about whether or not you would use this as an opportunity to contemplate leadership yourself of the Labour Party, you describe as mischief making, but a lot of people listening will be interested. You're still a relatively young man. This is your third term as mayor, unprecedented third term as mayor. When will we know whether you fancy a fourth?
We'll wait and see nearer the next election. I only won a history-making, record-breaking landslide victory a few months ago. So let's wait and see what the future holds.
I think we've got time for another call.
Absolutely. Let's take another call. And this one's from Harrow, and it's William. Morning, William.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know, as an eminent member of the Labour Party, can you explain to me, please, the silence over the slaughter in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? The Israeli army now are knocking down houses and bringing in bulldozers. Is there a word about it? No. The Gaza Strip has been bombed, I think, for the third time. Children's blood is all over the place and in the rubble. Is there a word about it? No. Why is that?
Look, William, I'm somebody who, does believe that what Hamas did on October the 7th was wrong, and I think hostages should be released and the bodies of those who were taken should be released. At the same time, I think the behaviour of the Israeli government and the IDF is not acceptable. I think when you speak to those who have either been in Gaza or indeed the West Bank, they will tell you of some of the horrors over the last few years. I think when you have a situation where humanitarian aid, this is not luxury suits being stopped and getting into Gaza or televisions. This is food and medicines now being stopped by the Israelis getting into Gaza, where you've got experts saying there are now people on the cusp of starvation, the potential of epidemics being caused. You got to call it out. And I think the behaviour of Netanyahu, the behaviour of his government, the behaviour of the IDF should be called out. And I think what's really important is people like you carry on reminding the world about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, because they'll be forgotten about because of all the geopolitics. You can see President Trump in the Middle East today. I'm hoping when he's in Saudi Arabia today, he's in Qatar over the next few days, and the UAE. That'll be an opportunity for President Trump to hear loudly and clearly the views of those respective countries, and he uses his influence over Netanyahu to stop this. It is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching when you see and hear these stories every day. And by the way, I began this answer, William, by deliberately talking about the hostages, because some people say you can't be sympathetic to both. I think you can. I think you can criticise Hamas and condemn them, but also say Netanyahu is behaving in a way that's despicable.
I think he was asking more about the silence from the Labour government.
Oh, look, William, listen, the way diplomacy works, I'm sure the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister are speaking to their respective colleagues in Israel and elsewhere to exert their influence. I know from the media, I've not discussed this with the Foreign Secretary or Prime Minister, but that David Lammy was meeting with France and Germany and other countries to discuss this issue very recently. You'll see, William, what President Macron has said in relation to Palestine as well. So, don't forget, we only get to see what happens in the public forum. But I've no doubt at all, both the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary are raising, the concerns that I've articulated, behind closed doors.
That's a bit. I mean, it may be true, but it's unlikely to satisfy William and many other people listening that the things that aren't being done in public, which many people want to see in public, include a defence that, they're almost certainly being done in private.
I just don't know. Sorry, William, I wasn't being disingenuous. I just simply don't know what's being done. What happens?
Well, what would you do if you were Foreign Secretary? You've got the senior members of the United Nations now using the word genocide. I had Kenneth Roth on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, who, as you know, spent 30 years running Human Rights Watch. No one's done more to stand up to despots and appalling conduct than he has, and he used the word genocide in my interview.
And you've seen what the ICC and ICJ have respectively said, and things have got worse, not better, since their preliminary judgment. William, let me tell you two personal experiences. I spoke to somebody during Ramadan who was here from Gaza, and separately I met somebody recently who's here from West Bank. And they said, don't underestimate the fact that when we hear about people talking about Palestine outside of Palestine, the difference it makes to us, the fact that people haven't forgotten us. So I'm not patronising you, William, but the fact that you're raising this in a public radio show is really important. Mm. Secondly, we've all got the power to lobby the government, me included. If we think the government aren't doing enough on this issue, we can lobby the government. And I'd encourage, all your listeners, James, and I've said this before in terms of the white paper, we live in the joy of a democracy, and the joy of pluralism is we can lobby our politicians to ask them to do more. And I think it is important that we put pressure on, all governments to say to Israel, listen, the view people have of the Israeli government is not going up as a consequence of your actions, it's going down. But on a daily basis, people are dying. Starvation and the deaths because of illness aren't inevitable, they're preventable, and they're man-made. The catastrophe in Gaza and the West Bank is man-made.
And you can go further than the government can because you're not involved in any diplomatic attempts to stay the hand of Benjamin Netanyahu.
No, I can answer the question as truthfully as I can and as openly as I can, as I always try and do on Speak to Sadiq.
One more call, I think.
Yeah, great. The next caller is from Westminster, and it's Hassan. Good morning, Hassan.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Good morning. Since we're talking about Israel, do you think what is happening in Gaza is genocide? And then I actually wanted to ask about the rise of reform, but please, if you can clarify the genocide question.
Well, as I said to James, when the preliminary judgment came out from the ICC and ICJ, they said it's plausible. I think things have got worse, not better, since then.
So, is it genocide, Sadiq?
I've been quite
clear. The Green Party thinks it is. Corbyn thinks it is. There are lots of people in ICJ, Human Rights Watch, others are saying this. Can you say the word?
Well, Hassan, it's quite clear what ICJ and ICC said. They said it's plausible genocide. And what I'm saying to you, things have got worse, not better, since then.
Okay, so you're not saying the word. Okay, thank you. Can you tell us how you're going to fight the rise of reform, which has done very well and is projected to make serious inroads in London?
Well, I don't think reform are pro-Palestine, Hassan. That's the first thing. Nor do I think have I heard Farage raise any concerns about the human rights of the Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank. So it's really important that we, compare the current Prime Minister to that person who may be the future Prime Minister on this sort of issue. The second point I'd make is this. Look, people who vote reform for a number of reasons. One of the reasons they vote reform is because of their unhappiness. They can't get decent housing. They see their loved ones not getting decent healthcare. Their children can't get into a decent school. They can't afford, the quality of life that they'd like to receive. And so I think what the job of government is nationally, and the job of me in London is to address the concerns people have and, deliver quickly on some of the issues that matter to them. So in London, for example, free school meals for every child that goes to a primary state school helps with the cost of living crisis. Freezing bus and tram fares helps with the cost of living crisis. Building council homes helps with the challenges raised by the rise of the parties for a very good reason. And I think the government's got to do two things. One is to reflect on why reform did so well last week, and then address the issues underlying that by delivering even faster on some of the challenges we face as a country. 14 years of austerity, 14 years of a lack of investment in the NHS, in schools, in affordable housing and so forth has led to a situation where reform are doing so well.
Hassan, thank you. It's coming up to 20 to 12. I pushed you at the beginning of the interview on your feelings, which I don't often do with politicians, about some of the words that Keir Starmer used yesterday. I'll do the same thing again if I may, but not about words that he used, something that has happened to him. Arrest this morning has been made of a 21-year-old man over suspected arson attacks on 2 properties linked to Sir Keir Starmer and a car. These, and as I say, an arrest has been made. These are threats that some politicians live with, or dangers, risks that some politicians live with on a daily basis.
Well, the point I'd make to this issue is, look, don't underestimate the ripples of fear that, Keir's quite stoic, but, Vic and the kids felt when they'd have read this stuff in the paper, right? But for the grace of God. And yes, they are safe, thankfully, in Downing Street. They've got a protection team with them, but they will have felt scared, frightened. The neighbours on this street, horrified. I want to thank and commend the police for their swift action, but also the London Fire Brigade as well. But it can't be right that any politician and their family faces these sorts of threats. And the context is that in the last 10 years, we've had 2 politicians losing their lives in this country, David Amess and Joe Cox, of course. We've had other politicians like Stephen Timms stabbed, and other politicians requiring 24-hour security from police experts who, and I just say, listen, it's really important to have a robust debate. I'm always ready to be questioned by you and by your listeners. We're doing a public forum. It's really important to lobby your MP, go and protest, go on demonstrations, sign petitions, vote for the other party, or don't if that's what you want to do. But I mean, when you've got a situation where this has happened, and then you see things on public, platforms, social media, where others are saying, well, it could have, the suspect could be any one of 70 million Brits. We can understand why this happened. You think that can't be right. And so I think it is important, to understand and empathise with the challenges a politician and his or her family faces without necessarily agreeing with their politics.
Is it worse now than when you started in politics?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Just much more feedback.
So I became a member of Parliament in 2005. And I had an office in Tooting. I would do regular casework. I make decisions all the time. I speak to MPs now. They've got panic buttons in their office. They've got CCTV in their offices. They don't have surgeries often. And I could go on for very good reasons, by the way, not because they're work shy or because they don't want to work, but because threats are made and so forth. And the problem is this: people may assume, when somebody's saying horrible comments or making threats on social media, it doesn't really matter. No, it does. Because that person could turn up physically and do harm, but it radicalises and normalises this sort of stuff, which I think is wrong. And here's a problem, James. If your son or daughter, nephew or niece, or somebody you speak to in a school is thinking about a career in politics, thinking about public service, thinking about putting their head above the parapet, they'll say, why bother? I mean, why would you advise anybody to become a politician, to get involved in public service when they see this happening to politicians and their families?
11:43, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Always a pleasure.
Sir Sadiq Khan, thank you very much for your time. It means we're slightly late for the very latest news headlines with Dominic Ellis.
London's Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan has told LBC that the Prime Minister's controversial migration speech has to be taken in context. Sir Keir Starmer is facing a backlash for suggesting yesterday the UK risks becoming an island of strangers without better checks. But speaking to James this morning, Sir Sadiq said the PM was referring to issues raised during the Brexit referendum campaign. A man's been arrested in connection with a series of fires at homes linked to the Prime Minister in